Thank you, and welcome to the webinar today. We're here to talk about ArcGIS maps and Microsoft integration. We have three products that we'll be discussing and describing today: Office 365, SharePoint, and PowerBI. Our agenda today is really simple. We're going to talk a little bit about Esri and Microsoft and some of the great work that we've been doing together, and then we're going to get right into it and dive into each one of the products: Office, SharePoint, and then Power BI, and then at the end we'll try to answer as many questions as we can get to. So with that said, let's get started. Esri and Microsoft, we've been strategic alliance partners for many, many years, a couple of decades, as from what I can gather from the experiences I've had with Microsoft and Esri together. We have a lot of work that we do with Microsoft, to include obviously our products that we're describing today, but also others. For example, the ArcGIS platform is somewhat built on the Microsoft Azure platform, the cloud platform. We have work with edge computing, analytics for IoT, a lot of engineering team collaborations around spatial, Geo-AI, and that's just to name a few. We've been working as a global partner with Microsoft for quite some time, and everywhere we go, people find this very well received, especially given the world is running on Microsoft for the most part in business. Today's integrations that we're talking about, these three products, Maps for Office and 365, Maps for SharePoint, and Maps for Power BI, are primarily focused on integrating within the host environments. More specifically, focused on mapping and visualization. We're not trying to boil the ocean with these things. We're trying to give the Microsoft user base a spatial and mapping visualization technology within the products that they use everywhere. And a little bit more about what we're finding, if you think about it, there's a lot of people out there that are adding location to their products right now, but Microsoft works very well with Esri, specifically around these things, as you'll see a little bit later on when we get into the details of some of these. But there are reasons why Microsoft likes working with Esri specifically. One, we are the world's leader in GIS. We've been doing it now for 40 plus years, and quite honestly, they recognize that spatial is important, and they recognize that it's more than just a map. And one of the things that we always talk about, it's not what you see, it's what you can do with what you see on a map. It's an important statement. It's not just a visualization, but it also leads to many more visualization techniques around your analysis with the spatial dimension. Analysis always starts and ends with the data, but we also have to remember that there's a spatial dimension. It's not just about placing your customers on a map or seeing where your sales territories are. It's a lot more than that, and that spatial dimension is treated as a first-class citizen in the Esri environments within these Microsoft integrations. We also recognize, and something that we talk about constantly, the world isn't flat. Neither is your data. A lot of folks out there don't think that their data includes any locatable elements, but in fact, I'd say the latest numbers that I was reading from some of the scientific journals, 80 to 90% of the world's data has some locatable element, be it a standard administrative boundary, addresses, coordinates, everything is locatable these days. But it's also important to recognize that there are things that you have to do to take this lumpy spheroid known as the world and flatten it out on a two-dimensional display to be able to represent the information correctly. And that comes down to understanding coordinate systems. Today, there's well over 6,000 coordinate systems available. And given that Esri is an international company, we have to recognize that there's a lot of countries out there that will refuse to leverage the map styles that have been made popular by Google and Microsoft, Bing and Google Maps, in that we have to support other types of coordinate systems, be it Equal Earth, be it British National Grid, UTM zones, whatever it may be. One is not necessarily correct over the other, but we do recognize that to display these information correctly And for correctness in your analytics, we have to recognize that and take that into account. I mentioned this before, your data is not spatial. Are you sure about it? And sure enough, there's a lot there. And all of these products have a capability known as Geo-Enablement that can work across the board with addresses, coordinates, even geographies at large. And last but definitely not least, one of the things that Esri brings to the table is authoritative content to augment your analysis. For example, demographic and lifestyle data for over 120 plus countries. In the US alone, it has well over 7,000 demographic and lifestyle variables for you to choose from. And you can show those directly inside of one of these Microsoft integrations. You can augment the data that exists, whether it be Power BI, Office, or SharePoint, or you can simply show some infographics across the board. With that said, let's dive right into Maps for Office, and I'll turn it over to Linda Beal.
Hi, thanks, Art. So let me tell you a little bit about ArcGIS Maps for Office. So if you can advance the slides for me, Art. If the first thing we can do is bring in that data and actually map that spreadsheet data. So it's really designed to work in two different ways. So it works for both Excel and it works for PowerPoint. So really the Excel is that kind of explore your data, see where it is. I mean, we normally do this kind of standard things, you know, hands up if anybody uses Excel. So I'm going to imagine all of you out there with your hands up in the air, because let's face it, who doesn't use Excel? We use it for all sorts of things we probably shouldn't. We use it to, we almost treat it like a database. We format all our data in it. We then upload that data and then we have a look at it and then we go, oh no, I've left one of those, you know, funny little icons in there that means I can't now map that, or I can't geocode it because it's picked up that hyphen where I really have nulls in my data or something. And we do that kind of in and out to make our data on that map. Well, using this Maps for Office, we can actually save ourselves a lot of that import-export steps, look at it directly within Excel. So put your map on there, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's the end of your analysis. You've got your spreadsheet of data, you've got your map of the data. It gives the person you're sharing it with, or even yourself, that context of where that data is. That can work in multiple different ways. It can either engage the audience that you're sharing it with. They see more information by seeing it on the map, or even for you as an analyst, you may be able to pick out sort of missing pieces in your data. Is there something else you need to go and fetch? Is some cleaning you need to do on that data? So that ability to sort of map that data right then and there can be a really integral part of your workflow. But it does go a little bit beyond just doing the spatial analysis. You're seeing here in this video that actually you can add in demographics. So you can start to do a little bit, give that context to that data. There are other little spatial analysis functions. I'll cover those in a little bit on the next slide. And also, once we've looked at that, of course, we can have those interactive maps in our PowerPoint. We don't need to have that static map. We can actually make it something engaging. That's really the value, and a lot of the point of the maps that we create is to engage the audience. So use a live one. Enable that conversation around the map. If somebody says, oh, look, there's my area, or what about this area down here? Allow people to zoom into that and get that information. So to give a little bit more context on those capabilities, so we can, as I've already mentioned, bring in that data. Obviously, we can geo-enable that data. So that spatial component that we're talking about that's in a lot of that data can be the XY, it can be joining it to other data sets. That's all within that data, and you can geo-enable that and see that directly within your Excel spreadsheet. You can kind of bring that data to life, add in demographic variables, give it the context for you to interpret the information that you're seeing. You've now got that sort of interactivity between your map and your spreadsheet, that ability to select the rows or even tidy up that data, as I was saying, to see that happening live there. And of course, the key bit, sharing that data out, you can share it back to anywhere else in ArcGIS. So you can be doing that kind of curating of that data, sharing it then up to ArcGIS Online or something, and then you have your data without all of that back and forth. And also, as I've mentioned, sharing those interactive maps within your PowerPoint. So, actually bringing our PowerPoints up to today's kind of standards rather than just being flat pictures that we're looking at. So how do we add the data in Maps for Office? Well, pretty simple. I mean, you're working right there within Excel. You can add the whole data set that you're working at. So it could be the whole spreadsheet, or it can be particular cells, name ranges, or particular tables that you're working within Excel. So you can select essentially whatever component you want to drop within that map. I've already mentioned how you can geocode that data. So you're going from your flat tabular data. You can do that geocoding. It could be an address that you have within that data set. You could already have XY coordinates. Now a lot of data that we use that's made freely available does already have those XY coordinates in it. Or it could be that you're joining it to another data set that you already have. It could be data that you have within your ArcGIS enterprise or online organization. And you can be adding in that data that you already have within those environments into your Excel maps that you're actually creating. So really you can start to do some fairly complex sort of visualizations of your data just within Excel, even without even having to leave that. So how do we work with those layers of data? Well, we're automatically pulling in a lot of what you'd expect from anywhere within ArcGIS. So we have all that functionality that you get. The smart mapping allows you to start making good maps. So you don't have to be an expert. If you are an expert, there is that functionality to dive in, change the colors, match things, change your classifications. All of these things are really allowing you to understand that data. Do you want to see the quartiles within your data? Do you want to see where those clear breakpoints are, where there are gaps within that data? All of these features are using classification. So the different classification types that we have allow you to pick out very different understanding and meaning within your data. And all of that functionality is right there for you to use within Excel. As I say, you're not an expert. We make sure that our defaults are sensible, so you can just jump straight in. You will have a map that you can interpret straight away by looking at it. But don't overlook all of that functionality that's in there, that way that you can interpret that data by seeing it on the map. So demographics, another feature that you can bring in. This is really what gives context to our data. It's all very well to see where your data is, but we're very rarely looking at our data in a vacuum. We tend to be trying to understand our data in relation to how many people there are, what the customer base is, what things are nearby, we're going, in that area, what are the demographics in sense of if you have a customer base you're particularly looking for, are they within that area that you're proposing to, let's say, put a new store or something? Again, all of that functionality, it's pretty advanced analysis. This is something that a few years ago would take a huge beast of a computer, and now we're just doing it straight within our Excel. So all of that functionality is there. And again, you can do that straight away without sort of building your data set, but then it can be part of that. You have that ability to look at these demographics and really explore them and explore those infographics that you get with all of that. So putting it into PowerPoint, you can create that slide directly from your Excel spreadsheet. So you've created your map within your Excel spreadsheet. You can then put that straight into a PowerPoint, and therefore you then have that live map, as I say, enables that conversation around the map. You can start to explore that map. You can start to sort of click on all those infographics that you've used. You can have all of that functionality. So it really starts to bring to life that PowerPoint that you're looking at and gives the value of why you would be looking at things spatially, why in many cases we do spatial analysis. So sort of share that experience and that knowledge with people by bringing that live to the presentations that you're giving. So that's a kind of a very brief overview of the functionality that we have within Maps for Office, and I'll pass it back to Art, who's going to explain the differences that we have in the versions.
Thanks, Linda. Let me just dive right in. One of the biggest questions and the most asked is, what versions of Office do we support? You know, obviously Microsoft has this thing called Office 365, and then there's the Office with a year after it, like Office 2019. Well, I just want to, in a live presentation, we generally say, can you spot the difference between these two versions? And it becomes really simple. It's right there. Now, I just want to qualify that one is a subscription service with a few extra offerings as part of that subscription and receives feature updates constantly. Whereas the other, Office 2019, is a one-time purchase that doesn't receive feature updates constantly. You simply get the maintenance as you go along for the length of that perpetual license, which is what it boils down to. It's the license model that you use. One includes a few extra things, more devices that you can install on, and that's the Office 365. The other one is limited cloud integration, static features, et cetera, et cetera. We support both. We don't want to, you know, we want to make sure that all of our users using whichever version of Office is supported, which is why we support not only the Office flavors, but also the Office 365 flavors, both 32-bit and 64-bit. In terms of supporting what you can connect to from the Office products, we support ArcGIS Online as well as ArcGIS Enterprise. Now, we're continuing to evolve this, so as ArcGIS continues to upgrade, we'll also continue to upgrade, as with Microsoft Office, we'll continue to upgrade. The roadmap is really pretty simple. We've already identified that the product itself is focused on mapping, so we need to continue enhancing those mapping defaults with more options for rendering, simplicity, ease of use, all of those things. We're continuing to work alongside the platform, so as the platform gets faster, we will continue to enable that back into the Office product and incorporate faster performance. Better user experience and user integration with Office. In other words, you shouldn't feel like you're in a separate product inside of Excel and PowerPoint. You should feel like it's just part and parcel to the same. And again, as ArcGIS continues to evolve, we'll continue to evolve along the lines of mapping and visualization within these Office products. But the important thing I really want to stress is that the teams pay attention to your feedback. Your use of this product is what's important. So the more information we get from you, the field, the people using the product itself, the more that enhances what we do, when we deliver, and how often we deliver. Just wanted to throw a couple of extra resources in there, some getting started information as well as a download in terms of the Office overload, et cetera. All of this is available on our product page. With that, Lynn, I'm going to go ahead and keep diving into Maps for SharePoint. So, excellent. So let's talk about SharePoint. It is a huge beast. Anyone that's been working with SharePoint for any length of time knows that it covers a lot. It really does. And what we have done is integrated mapping with SharePoint. And it too allows for geo-enablement of your SharePoint data, adding additional context to your map itself with other content from within your ArcGIS organizations. But with SharePoint, we also extended it because of the capabilities of SharePoint with a capability known as geotagging and geo-searching. Any SharePoint document can now be tagged directly to a given feature. So you can imagine I have a few document libraries out there. I have some documents that are associated with a given site. Let's call it maintenance reports that are being collected out there. What I can do now directly inside of our Maps for SharePoint is select the documents I'm interested in, tag them with a given feature, and now those documents are always available from the map. And so you can see all documents relevant to a given site with maintenance reports. Searching for those SharePoint documents is equivalent. So we've extended the SharePoint search capability to understand how to work with geotagged documents and allow you to pull those things up. There are a lot of different things that you can do inside of SharePoint. One of them is treat it like a database. You can create SharePoint lists, otherwise known as tables in a database. And these SharePoint lists are tagged such that you can geo-enable these lists, leveraging something known as SharePoint and Azure workflows. SharePoint workflows are all about SharePoint on-premises. Azure workflows are all about SharePoint online. You can set these workflows up by simply going to your SharePoint list, click on Workflow Settings, and then fill in and add a workflow, and then of course fill in the details associated with that. You can basically go through and add, whether it's coordinates, addresses, standard geographies, or whatever it may be. You can enrich things with demographic and lifestyle information to augment the table with additional information once it's been geolocated. You can support different candidates and tasks which are integrated directly within SharePoint. And once it's enabled, a new field type for maps is added to the list. So when you actually look at the record, you actually see a map representing the location and not the location itself in the form of a numeric display. So we've taken this a huge step forward with integration into SharePoints with these workflows. The nice thing about these workflows, it'll go through the list one time in the beginning, try to geocode as much as possible based on coordinates, addresses, or geographies, enrich the demographics, but then every time a record is inserted into SharePoint or updated, it'll rerun this workflow, so it'll always be up to date. The geo-searching of documents is also built right in and allows you to associate any document to a given location and easily find them using a map. Basically, bring up the document libraries, select the documents, tag them with the feature, and away you go. And this is a really visual display. And because we only have an hour, we really don't have a lot of time to dive in and show you the whole workflow, but we have some definite demos that are out there that we can share with the webinar attendees. Visualize and share. Not only can you, of course, create a whole map as part of your page. As you know, SharePoint itself is configurable and customizable. So you can add these maps to your SharePoint page. But more importantly, you can style them, again, using all the different smart mapping technologies that we have available in ArcGIS, and those will continue to evolve. Once you visualize the data, and of course, what's the next thing? Share it back to my ArcGIS organization, and it will definitely make things a lot smoother when you want to use SharePoint data in ArcGIS. One thing that a lot of people don't recognize is that SharePoint itself, the Maps for SharePoint product, is extensible. Simply using JavaScript and what we call these extension packs, you can add additional tools, behaviors, even additional custom marker sets to augment your visualization and mapping capabilities directly inside of Insights. This has been out there for quite a while, and if there's any questions, of course, we have our full documentation online that you can always reach out to. Just like with Maps for Office, we support both SharePoint on-premises, or also known as SharePoint Server, as well as SharePoint Online in Office 365. This, like what Linda was saying with Excel, who doesn't use SharePoint? A lot of people don't realize that they use SharePoint under the covers. OneDrive itself is truly nothing more than SharePoint under the covers. So I believe everyone is using SharePoint, and from what we understood, SharePoint itself, a lot of our users are telling us that they're either moved to SharePoint Online or moving to SharePoint Online. Last set of numbers that I received was 75% of our user base is moving to SharePoint Online with the subscription of Office 365. In terms of supporting ArcGIS versions, we support both Online and Enterprise. Online is always the latest version, and of course, Enterprise, at this point in time, it's 10.5 and later. Again, here, because of those numbers and the move of a lot of our users to online, we need to enhance our support for SharePoint Online. We need to support the latest modernizations that Microsoft teams have been doing for SharePoint and continue to enhance our support of SharePoint Online. With that said, we are creating a brand new mapping visualization for the modern SharePoint. This will be brand new. This is in addition to what you currently have in terms of the geotagging, geosearching, the existing mapping part, mapping field type. We're adding a new map visualization specifically for the modern SharePoint experiences. And we're going to continue enhancing those experiences based on the direction that Microsoft SharePoint team is going with the modernization of SharePoint with modern pages, etc. We are evolving the architecture under the hood, again, to support the modernization of SharePoint. They've added and extended a whole new set of frameworks and APIs that we are taking advantage of in our upcoming release. And of course, moving also to support the latest JavaScript APIs from Esri to give you all the latest features that people are expecting from Esri capabilities, even those integrated into other environments. Supporting mobile is also a big part of this, as we want to continue to evolve the types of devices that are supported with these integrations. Most important, just like with Office, we expect, we listen to our user feedback. What's expected of all the product teams at Esri is to pay attention to our users. They're the ones that are using it. That is what we need to respond to. So whatever feedback you have will be weighed heavily by the product team and prioritized as such. Again, some resources to help you get started. Of course, all of this is on our product pages. From the main page, select products, location analytics, and then select Office, SharePoint, or even Power BI, which we're about to get into in just a minute. But one other thing, for SharePoint Online, we are actually in the marketplace. So to install SharePoint into your online, simply download the ArcGIS maps on the marketplace, and you can download it and install it very seamlessly and easily. With that, Power BI. I'm just going to take the first slide of this, Linda, and then I'll turn it right over to you.
Sounds good.
I just wanted to highlight the Power BI team at Microsoft is working very closely with the Esri team building this integration. And I just wanted to highlight this one slide that we did receive from Microsoft Power BI team. It shows both cloud and on-premises data through the Power BI services working across web, on-premises, mobile, embedded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a huge capabilities list, device support list, all of which the Esri Power BI team, the integration team, is definitely paying attention to and has all of these things on the roadmap for full support of Power BI, especially given that we are in the box, nothing to install. It ships out of the box and you can start using it, and it's enhanced if you have an ArcGIS account. There's a lot more that you can do with it. And with that said, let me turn that over to Linda.
Okay, so what can you do with ArcGIS maps for Power BI? Well, you're kind of hopefully by now seeing a bit of a pattern. We're obviously bringing that spatial component to the host environment you're working as, your Microsoft environment. We are trying to make sure that you can create really good maps. Obviously, most of them, there's an element of spatial analysis. There's something in there, but we're concentrating on it being that place where you can see your data come to life on the map. So as Art's already mentioned, and it's a very important point, we are the built-in visual with Power BI. So we are the spatial provider in that sense for Power BI. we work with that business layer that you're working with within Power BI. So we allow you to location enable that tabular data that you have. We work between all of the different visuals, but you can now add that visual of the map together with all the analysis that you're doing within Power BI. Really, without the map, in many cases, it's just a bit of a flat report and dashboard. Put the map in there, get people engaged with where you're talking about things, and add that spatial component to what you're doing within Power BI. So say we're the in the box one, that's the advantage that you have. We're already there, nothing to set up. You can get going with creating your map straight away. You also have access to much of that sort of ready to use content that ArcGIS has. So you're able to kind of reach into everything that we can produce within ArcGIS itself. You can run the spatial analysis that we have within there. As I say, it's not extensive in terms of spatial analysis, but sometimes it's just a few key things that will help you answer those questions. You do get that interactivity across all of the visuals. So it's not that you're putting in a static map or even just a separate thing. You're able to work with that business layer across everything, including that map. As I already mentioned, there is some differences between whether you are an ArcGIS user yourself, so whether you have access to our ArcGIS license, or whether you're using it as the free to use license. So because we're in the box, we make it available to anybody who has a license for Power BI, but anyone who doesn't have the license to ArcGIS is going to have limited functionality. So we want everyone to be able to see the map, but there's an awful lot more that you can start to do. And you will probably see that gap widening a little bit as we start to build out the Power BI maps. So as I say, because it's in the box, because it's available freely for everyone, you can just get started. So we have a new little icon. So we've been in there for many releases now, but the icon has changed. So if you're looking for it and can't find it, it may just be that it looks a little bit different. So in every release of Power BI, you will see that we're there. You can select that icon and then you decide how you want to sign in. So the standard version is just freely available. As I say, everyone can get going with that, but you're going to have limited options available to you. If you have an ArcGIS license, so that either be that online or enterprise, doesn't matter which, but you just select the appropriate box and sign into your organization, and then you will have access to all of that functionality that you can get within Power BI. First thing you want to do when you get going is obviously geo-enable that data. It's tabular data that you're bringing into Power BI. So you can geo-enable that either using coordinates. So if you already have the XY data with XY fields within that data, longitude, latitude, however it's stored, you can get going with that. It may be addresses that you have within your data set, in which case you can geocode against Esri's geocoder, or you can join it to other data sets. So if it's data that pertains to areas, so polygon area data, then you can join that to that. So that way you can immediately start to map your data within Power BI. So you do get to use all of the smart mapping functionality. So just as you'd expect for anything within ArcGIS, you have access to all of that. It will take you should be working with your data in the same way you would expect to for anything you're doing within Power BI. So you're using the field wells to define the size, the color, the time, and how you actually want to display that on the map, but you're using that Power BI functionality. And this is something that you'll see. We're going to talk a little bit more about how things are going to be changing, because we really want to make sure that you have all of that advantage and operations that you can do with ArcGIS data, but you're using it within Power BI and working with it in the way that you expect to work within data within Power BI. We also make available a number of the different base maps. So here you'll start to see the differences now between whether you're using just the standard, the free version. you get 4 standard base maps. That's all you'll get. You can switch between those 4. If you're an ArcGIS user, then you will get to use all of the organizational base maps that you have, plus these 4 standard ones. Obviously, everyone gets the standard ones, but you get to open that up to a lot more, including all of the ones that might use different projections. You can also add in additional information, so you can add in additional map layers for context of understanding what you're seeing on the map. So everyone will get access to US demographic layers and public ArcGIS content. If you're an ArcGIS user, obviously you get all of that. You also get global demographic layers, all of the content that anyone in your organization has and they've shared, and all of Esri Living Atlas layers. So that's a lot of data that you suddenly have access to and can start to explore within Power BI. Global demographics, so I mentioned there's a little bit of analysis in there. You could argue that enriching your data and adding in all these demographics to understand what you have within your data is part of that. So you have access to all of that. You can also see that information on little cards that will appear on the top of the map. So you can add in all of that for US data. Within the free version, within ArcGIS, you have everything across the world. So there is a lot more that is available again for the ArcGIS user themselves. I mentioned a little bit about coordinate systems. This is just to show how many coordinate systems that we deal with in ArcGIS. So if you are working beyond Web Mercator, you can change your base maps to that using your organizational account. And you can use all of the data from many, many different coordinate systems. So just to give you an example of why, for example, you might want to add in a map. This is a standard, let's say, Power BI dashboard that people will be looking at. So you have all of that rich interactivity. You can explore the data using lots of different chart types. But imagine that you can add in that spatial component. So now suddenly your dashboard comes to life and you have that information on the context of where those events are occurring. And very often that really is the key part of the story. So that functionality is open to anyone who has Power BI. So use it, use that ability to bring those maps in. So we've been talking about the different sort of licensing that you can get, the different ways to get ArcGIS maps for Power BI. So it's in the box. It's available for anyone who has Power BI. You have access to lots of different features within there. Most importantly, you can put your data on a map. You can get the US demographics, any publicly shared maps in ArcGIS Online. You can see those locations. You can geocode it. You can bring in, you can change your data to things like heat maps. You can use drive times. You can enrich those variables. You can see different base maps, and you will get some technical support from Microsoft. Extend that to actually having your own ArcGIS license, so be that either an enterprise or an online one. You have the world demographics. You can use all the ready-to-use curated data that we make available from Esri. You can add in multiple map layers to your map, so that's one very big difference. You can see more locations, unlimited for the number of location types. You have access to your premium base maps. You can see content that your organization has. So you're able to view that kind of the private content that you have within your organization. And you're able to get both technical support from both Microsoft and Esri. So now you have that ability to contact either, depending whether it's a spatial issue or an issue with Power BI itself. So I'm going to hand it back to Art, who's actually going to show a little bit about how the new version of Power BI is going to look.
Thanks, Linda. Because of the way that we have to build our integration with Power BI and depend on the Microsoft development environments, we had to record a little video here to demonstrate some of the things that are coming up in our very next release. This we're hoping to have in the June timeframe. But again, what we were talking about was better integration with Power BI, the ability to leverage the format pane, better authoring controls over what the viewers actually see in terms of the capabilities that you want to expose on the map. And also configuration experiences to make it very easy to understand what's going on. So let me just go ahead and get this started. And you'll start right off the bat with maps for Power BI mapping tools. Now this video here now shows, if for anyone using the Power BI visual today, you had to literally go into this thing we call in focus edit mode, and then you get a whole different way of doing things. We've changed that. Now it's just front and center in authoring mode to enable you to actually get to those different capabilities without without those capabilities being hidden. Selections in this particular case here are pretty straightforward, directly off the main menu, and this is configurable to by an author to enable selections as part of your viewing experience as well. Selecting based on bounding box or point and click, all straightforward and in there. We've had many requests to make the geo searching capability, the ability to type in name, place, address, whatever it may be, front and center. And sure enough, we went ahead and added that, which is also configurable directly on the format pane now. As you see, there's a few tools out there like the mapping tools, search tools, whether or not you want to see the table of contents and layers. All of that's now available right from the format well where you would expect it, and not off of a customized menu in the in focus edit mode. So now it's just front and center for you. And if it's on when you publish this to viewers, it'll be available to them as well. The Basemap gallery is no longer in the in focus edit mode as well. We've actually moved this out, and it's just another yet capability of tools that you can select from. If you're tied to an Esri organization, all of your Basemaps available to you will be available from this gallery. You can search your different Basemaps, and if you're standard in the box, you'll only see those 4 that Linda was pointing out earlier. With that, I think the next one, these infographic cards. These are an interesting one. This is a form of analysis that actually takes for a given selected set or your current extent that you're looking at, the ability to see demographic variables of information that reflect the variables that you're looking at. Whether it's world, and based on these different categories, you can go through all of them and add these things known as infographic cards. And as you select different things, those cards dynamically reflect your current selection. And of course, the ability to add additional layers, of which ArcGIS users can now support multiple layers, not just a single layer from ArcGIS and a single layer from Power BI datasets, but ArcGIS users can add multiple ArcGIS layers from their organizations directly onto the map. We will continue to evolve this capability for ArcGIS users such that you should see, as part of our roadmap, which we'll talk about in just a minute, the ability to add interactivity from all of these ArcGIS layers, or at least the ones that are reflected or related to information in your Power BI data set. Drive times as well is now a capability that an author can choose is on the map in author mode or in view mode. So you can do things like find nearby, find similar. Here's some other light spatial analysis that we have. Some of these things, like I said, are now configurable, and it's all front and center. No longer do you have to go searching for a way to configure or enable some of these things out there. With that being said, I think that's really about all that I really wanted to get into there. The road ahead, as I just described, is going to have some tighter user experience integration to Power BI. More things made available on the format pane, on the field wells. We're going to continue extending our capability lists with support for published web, embedded, even the on-premises report server, which right now is tentatively scheduled for release in the fall, but we'll see what happens after Microsoft puts it on their roadmap. Again, keep in mind, we're in the box with Microsoft, so our release schedule depends on their release schedule with some of these things. We're going to continue enabling things like drill through, up and down with things like hierarchies and whatnot, geo-hierarchies, if I will. And of course, every release, we're continuing to focus not only on performance, but also on quality. So we continue to evolve the product along these lines. With that said, we're going to slow down now. There was a lot of material being presented today, and want to take a few minutes to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, we have a few questions lined up for you guys. The first one is about Excel. Can I edit an attribute table attached to a feature class in Excel?
I didn't know if you wanted to answer that one, Linda.
Oh,
But
I was sorry, I was letting you do it. You go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. So can you edit an attribute table in Excel that's associated to a given feature class? It's really the other way around right now, where you can edit the Excel data and reflect that directly on the map that you've geo-enabled on the map. And if you share that layer, and if you share that layer for the second or third time, only the changes will be updated on your feature layer that was shared originally. But the other way around, where I have an attribute table associated with a feature class, that is something that we've had on our roadmap. We haven't heard many people looking to do it that way, but thank you for the question, and we'll definitely add it to our list of things to consider for the future.
Great, next question. Can the maps be shared in both ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online, or does the map have to go into ArcGIS Pro first before going into ArcGIS Online?
I'll jump on that one as well. From Excel, you share it into your ArcGIS organization, whether it's enterprise or online first, and then it's available to all other ArcGIS clients or any third party that knows how to leverage our ArcGIS open APIs.
Great, the next one is also about Excel. This one is asking about the data's length. Is there an extra plug-in in order to increase the data length in Excel?
That one's a tough one. Sorry, Linda, it sounds like I'm jumping on all of these.
No, you're fine,
Okay.
you're fine.
Excel itself is limited to about 1 million rows per spreadsheet. That's an Excel limitation. That's not an Esri limitation. We work with whatever Excel can handle. I understood 64-bit handles that much better than 32-bit platforms. However, that is something that we've raised with the Excel and Office teams in general, and have yet to hear an answer back as to what or when they're going to do to enhance that.
Great, next question is about Power BI. Can you publish hosted services in Portal from Power BI and put the results in a story map?
Not yet. That is a very good question. I want to be able to publish whatever I did inside of Power BI back to ArcGIS. And that is something that we have not done yet, but that is something that we're looking to do. Very similar to what we do with Office and SharePoint today. Just we haven't gotten to it yet.
Great, next question. Can I open an ArcGIS online map authored by a creator user in the free version of Maps for Office?
You can only connect in to content that is not freely shared, openly shared, if you have the ArcGIS license. So it really depends on the sharing of that data set as opposed to where it's been shared to.
All right, the next one's also about Power BI. Right now I use ArcGIS SDE database Can we visualize ST geometry or Esri SDE geometry types in Power BI?
So if you've shared that as a feature layer through ArcGIS, and then that feature layer is added as a reference layer in Power BI, you'll be able to see your SDE data in Power BI. Yes, I think that was the question, correct?
I believe so. I think that's how they worded it. If the person would like to add any clarifying comments, please just type it in the chat. And then the last question, kind of more of a comment really, they're saying that they would find it helpful to be able to edit the attributes of a feature class in Excel. They were wondering if it would be a similar process with SharePoint, having people update data in SharePoint so that they don't have to learn Arc and they want to keep everything in Excel.
Yeah, that, like I said, that's it hasn't really been asked too many times. We have heard it before. It is on our backlog, but given this webinar and this information, we can definitely consider that for sure. It will require a few changes. Right now, all you need to be is a viewer in ArcGIS in order to leverage Power BI, but you may have to be a creator in order to edit the attribute table. But that's just par for the course in terms of editing information back in ArcGIS land. So we adhere to the information and security models of ArcGIS while within Power BI once you're signed in to ArcGIS or signed in to ArcGIS inside of Power BI.
Great. Next question. We use PGDBs, which I think means Postgres databases, extensively in the past to create forms and reports in Access. Now that PGDB is eliminated, what replaces it?
Good question. If it's the Postgres database, Postgres is still out there and available today. But what replaces it with Access? That's a very good question. I don't have an answer, but we'll write that one down and try to get back to whoever asked this question later.
Great, I've made a note of that as well. Next question, can we use Power BI with ArcGIS Enterprise?
The answer to that question is yes. Linda, we both answered that same time. That was cool. Yeah, 10.7.1 and up. ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7.1 and up.
Sorry, I've got some clarification on the last question with the databases. The question was about personal geodatabases in Access.
Oh. Again, we'll have to get back on that one.
Great, and I think the last question, can Power BI connect a portal using PKIs?
This is a security question that what we try to do, the simple answer is we work with OAuth authentication. PKI is currently not supported. This is a collaboration that we have with Microsoft. This is on their roadmap to enable that for us. Today, it's not there, but we know that is in their next semester plan to enable that for us. But as of right now, PKI is a limitation, and it first needs to be corrected by the Microsoft Power BI team, and then we can enable that through our integration as well. ArcGIS does support it, but our integration with Power BI is currently lacking that, and we are working with the Microsoft team to enable that going forward.
Great, thanks so much for taking time for questions, and thanks for the presentation, and thanks everyone who attended for spending your time with us. I hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.